Jamie Azzopardi,
Hello.
welcome to Let's Be Frank.
I'm ready.
How are you today?
I'm super
Hectic.
good. Yeah, it's been a busy week, but I'm actually really happy to be here and really happy to kind of have a day off.
It's a day off.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited to have you here and
Same.
have this conversation. It's going to be chill. It can be a little chill part of your day.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Everyone knows that you've been really hectic lately. It's kind of that time of year where
is.
everything all happens at once.
Yeah,
The
especially
middle of the year, it's nothing. And
Yeah.
then now it's 7 things in one day.
I know, yeah. My world kind of revolves around the bigger style events and how we formulate that into a year. So this time of the year is like pre-planning for the beginning of the year plus all of the end of year stuff. So it's that mashup time where my team just kind of loses their mind for a couple of weeks and we have to just push through, I guess.
And you're all just running around in circles trying
Yeah.
to make everything work because you've got people. I want you here and I want you here and I
Yeah.
want you here.
And I want to change things last minute, which is always the fun part of being a stylist.
What have you been up to, like, that you can tell us about
Sure.
lately? Because just watching your stories literally makes me exhausted on your behalf. I'm like,
Thank you.
oh.
I can
Like-
tell you, it makes me exhausted too.
Do you get downtime?
I'm not great at downtime. I'm really not great at downtime. Something you probably should know straight up. We didn't talk about this earlier, but I'm an empath. So like I feel I have a really big feeling for someone else. So I tend to put other people in front of my own feelings, which
I can relate to that.
yeah. It has a really hard knock feeling because when you do get downtime, you tend to spend that with your friends. And in my world, my friends are so busy that fitting in with their world is a little bit harder than the normal friendship group. But that also keeps me in check, I think. So some things I've been up to. There's so much.
What haven't you been up to
Yeah,
is probably the better question.
There's so much. We are in the middle of a whole bunch of shoot dates, which is super, super nice. A couple of really big campaigns. Dally M's, Brownlow are coming up. We have 2 weeks and 3 weeks, which is super fun. End of year events for both the AFL and NRL, which is always a hectic time of year. I don't do a lot of spring racing carnival. I'm a vegan, so for me, that's not a big thing. However, I have a rule if a client is doing that, then we help them out with that kind of stuff. So there's all of that kind of stuff in the background. And then the ARIAs, the actors, we just finished the Logies, the Golden Globes. There's so much coming up. So much coming up that we are, it's interesting. There's actually something really big coming up that I'm sure you will ask me a question about later and I will tell you. But there's something really big coming up that is kind of weird for me, very nerve-wracking, but we will get through it.
Listening to you talk about all of that, I'm like, I have to take a breath for you because there's so much and that's all so exciting and we'll get to it later. But I really, with this, I want to take a step back and rewind kind of to how we got to this place today because everyone has a journey and everyone's still within their own journey. Tell us about your childhood, where you grew up, what you did for fun, what school was like for you, because school's such a fun story for everyone to talk about.
Yeah, cool. So going back, I grew up, with kind of one parent. We moved around a lot. My mum wasn't the easiest mum to deal with. She battled with some drug abuse stuff in her life and we moved around quite a bit. I grew up in the western suburbs of Melbourne, went from living in the western suburbs of Melbourne to living in Geelong and then came back. I moved out of home when I was 14, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. So moved out of home when I was 14, came back to live in Melbourne when I was 14 with my grandparents and I moved out of my grandparents' house at 17 or 18. I think I just finished year 11 and I decided that I was coming to Sydney and that was kind of that. School was interesting. I mean, being the queer kid both in the western suburbs of Melbourne and in Geelong, I think was I think taught me a lot. I went to a really sports focused school in Geelong. So, you know, there were 6 people in my year level that play AFL. There were 4 that play NRL, and growing up with them was you heard a lot of different things, and they weren't necessarily the nicest things. Coming back to Melbourne, I mean, growing up in that Western suburb space, I think the thing that was my takeaway in the end was that the multiculturalism kind of set in, and being a Euro who didn't necessarily fit into that space, and then being an outcast in that community, however that looked, was super interesting. But I think the flip side of that taught me that I kind of knew who I was pretty early. And it may have taken those people a little while to figure out who they were. But having talked to quite a few people from my past now, I know that they kind of wish they were there earlier, which was kind of my gift, I guess.
And you were learning about yourself faster than everyone else, and learning how to be within yourself and be alone as well. Growing up, were you very much of an academic growing up, or are you more?
I was a little bit nerdy. I use the word nerdy because I was not smart, but I would study to be smart. So I was the kind of person who would read lots of books. I loved history. I really, really loved history. And I think being an empath, history teaches us our future, in my opinion. And I would read about, you know, Nelson Mandela and Princess Di and people who were really, really big change makers in their own world, and how that kind of worked into the world. There was a really, she's huge now, but there was a really big drag queen who you all will know as Drew Paul, who really kind of influenced a lot of my decision making really early on. I mean, I knew that I was non-binary a long time before I said I was non-binary, and I knew that there was a side of my life where I would wear what is traditional women's wear. But I think I also knew pretty early on I wanted to work in fashion. I just didn't have the skills to be able to do that. So, I mean, I grew up taking textiles, and I just had this weird thought about Miss Butcher, my textiles teacher, who would be so proud of me now. But she kind of instilled in me the thought process of like, don't think of menswear as menswear, or don't think of women's wear as women's wear. It's all just clothing, and that depends on the person who wears it. So yeah, I guess, you know, like I said, I wasn't ever academic. I definitely wasn't the smartest kid in my school for sure, but I was somebody who definitely liked to study. I was a little bit of I know this is going to come off so weird because I feel like people think I'm an extrovert, but I'm really not. I'm kind of an introvert. I really do like my own space, I have a really big team now, and even when we're all in one room, there are times where I'm like, nope, like just let me have my creative process by myself, because I think that sometimes too many voices are too many voices. So yeah, I guess I am a little bit of an introvert, and that's what I learned growing up.
And speaking about too many voices, we were talking about opinions before, and how everyone has the different opinions. How do you think that affected you growing up and your career path and led you to today?
I think it's interesting because I think that a lot of people have a preconceived idea of who I am, who Jamie is. Whether they've actually met me or not, I think on both sides, they have a preconceived idea of who I am or what I am. I think if you read the news, you would think I'm an asshole. And I'll just put that really, really blatantly. And I can be. I mean, we all can be. I'm a pretty direct person, mainly because in my world, fashion is either right or wrong, and there is a way to do things. That's not to say an outfit is right or wrong, but the way you construct a garment, the way you wear a garment, the way the way you work on set, that's all really kind of structured. So I am a really direct person, and I have no problem saying, okay, this isn't right, or I don't like this, or those kind of things. I was always that person. So people didn't necessarily love me, and I definitely grew up with a lot of enemies, and I'm so fine with that because I feel like that shaped who I am as an adult.
Especially in this industry.
Yeah,
You've
I
got to
mean,
back yourself and your voice.
here's the truth about our industry, and we were talking about this earlier
Yeah.
also, but you're not going to be everyone's friend. You don't have time for everyone. There isn't. I would love to be the human that says, you know, we have infinite amount of time, and we can all have conversations with each other, and everyone's vocal is valid. But the reality is, we don't have infinite time. There will be a day for everyone where that ends, and that's unfortunate. But that is the reality. So, you either go in with the tact that some people are worth more time than others, or you go in with the idea that you're going to give everyone the same amount of rope, and once they've hung themselves, that's kind of the end of the conversation, right? So
It's a really interesting point of view as well.
yeah, I think that in my world, I value my own time. I value the space that's inside my head and how many people get to have an opinion on that. I value how much conversational fodder there is. And I also kind of value the idea that if you allow someone space into your head, whether it's positive or negative, they're in there. That view of whatever they have is there. So you have to deal with that. You have to unpack that. You have to understand whether it works for you. You have to kind of allow them space. So the more you do that, the more gray area, I guess, there is in any given conversation.
And another thing I wanted to ask you, jumping forward a little bit, because we kind of touched on it now, how do you differentiate between noise that's good and useful and noise that's not within rumors and feedback and opinions?
I think that words are words. There has been so much in my personal life, there's been so much written about a situation that I don't think a lot of people would ever really know about. There was a there was a story, a really it's probably about a 5-year-old story now, from a time where I was getting divorced, and no one knew I was getting divorced. I mean, the divorce happened so quickly. We didn't really even get a chance to unpack that. Michael had to go back to Germany when COVID happened. We'd been married a week earlier. COVID happened while we were on holiday. He came back to Australia. The Australian government said, we won't give you a second visa, even though you were married. You need to leave.
Wow.
And 4 years later, we were different people. But there was a very big story where a lot of people had opinions. And I think that taught me that they're just words. If you want to believe something terrible about me as a human, go ahead.
Especially if you haven't met me.
You've done my job for me, and kind of thanks, because you, like I said earlier, you're not going to be everyone's best friend. Like that's the reality. There are 9 billion people on the earth. Not all of them are going to share your opinion. Not all of them are going to like you. Not all of them are going to be able to even understand your world. So if you've cancelled yourself out for me, kind of great.
Thank you.
Yeah, like in the words of Ariana, like
See ya.
next. Yeah, like I'm really okay with not being everyone's best friend, because
And that's a skill not many people have.
that's a skill I don't think many. Yeah, like it's a very learnt skill. Like you have to value your time. And I guess in my career, I've worked with some really incredible human beings, some that are globally famous. And I think that that's kind of a skill that rubbed off on me. Like they're not my friends. They're there to do a job, and so am I. We can be in the same space. We can be amicable. We can smile at each other. We don't have to say negative
You
things.
can get the job done.
Yeah, it's transactional, you know. And I think that sometimes is life, and I think sometimes, not always, but in the vast majority of situations, I feel like people don't ever understand that, which is a really hard knock situation. I mean, like I said to you, I grew up in the West in Melbourne, and I grew up in a suburb called St Albans. And if you know St Albans, you know it's pretty rough. Like I was queer my whole life. I came out of the womb queer, but it was never rough on my sexuality. I don't think people were really. They may not have understood it, especially being a melting pot of, there was a lot of Asian population and a very heavy Euro population. These days there's more of an African influx of population. So I don't think those specific cross genders of people totally understand that space. But they never, I was never at risk. I was more at risk of being not mentally understood, I suppose. But I guess that these days is kind of what people aspire to, I guess.
When did you really find what you wanted to do? At what age? And what made it click?
Not a great story, but I will tell you it. I was really young. My mum and I don't have a great relationship, as you probably could have inferred from earlier. She had a boyfriend. That I didn't love. And there was a day, I'm going to say 14, around year 8, and I had just broke. I couldn't deal with not being the person I was any longer. And I had said, I don't remember the exact words I'd said to her, but I'd said something along the lines of, will you choose me or him? Whichever one you want, we can make that work. And she sent me to my room and kind of was just like, I'm not dealing with this. So when I was in my room, I packed my stuff and I grabbed, I think, a bag of clothing, and I left. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon. I went to my school, to Oberon, in Geelong, and I stayed with a friend for about 7 months. And I made that decision. In that spot, it was, you either choose to love me and accept me for who I am, or I'm going to do this without you, and you're going to be the person who pays for it in the end. And like, without trying to get too deep about it, I mean, it's not really a conversation piece that I talk about a lot. My mum and I have always had a tumultuous relationship. There's never been, she was super young when she had me. She was 16. She was a baby. And I mean, in the 90s, that was a pretty common place. You were quite young having a baby. You grew up with, a very close relationship. I think now my relationship with being a parent has been affected by that, because I don't think I ever want to be a parent. But I also think that, to answer your question, that moment taught me that being myself was the most important part of me. So if there was a negative connotation to being that, then you either had to really know whether that's what you wanted to be or not, or you just had to go with it. And I think that, like I said, I really knew who I was growing up. And at that moment, I just decided that was it. That was the rest of my future. And there were definite struggles along that journey to get here. There were days where I wondered if I'd made the wrong decision, but there was no going back. There was not a conversation in my head where I could have taken that back. And I'm kind of glad, because
to do what I love today.
Now. Yeah, exactly.
That's really personal, and I really appreciate you saying that as well. But you're here and you have a beautiful career and a beautiful life. I mean, for anyone that's watching you, how could you not be like, wow, like,
thank you.
That's everything you've accomplished. I'm like sitting here listening to you and I'm like, wow.
It's actually really funny. I always cry when I say this part, so I'm going to do my best not to. But
it's okay.
there was a really defining factor for me when I chose to start wearing women's wear, you asked me the question of where was I when. And I think there was an important part for me when I first wore women's wear, and I'll never forget this moment. There had been the conversation of wearing women's wear publicly versus not wearing women's wear publicly, and I had always worn women's wear. I mean, my friends in Geelong will tell you I wore women's wear more than they did. And I'll remember, I will go back and to go forward with it. A friend of mine, Natalie Rocco, whose brother I was absolutely in love with in high school. I used to borrow her pants because they would just fit me better. And I would know, like, at such a young age that it was like, this isn't women's wear, this is just a pair of pants. It doesn't make any difference to me. But when I first wore women's wear publicly and I posted it on my Instagram, I had the most horrible experience. It was, I don't know if I can say it out loud, but it was like, you should die. You're a faggot. I hope you're killed. I had death threats. I had somebody actually set, weird, I don't know why I've never actually talked about this, but I had someone set my front door on fire.
My God.
And yeah, like it was just like the weirdest thing ever because
And were they people your age? Were they kids?
they're people I knew. The person who set my door on fire, I actually knew them.
Crazy.
Yeah. And we, like, it was just such a different experience. Forward on 10 years, or 8 years, I think it is now. I think the truest thing that I can tell you is I never wear women's wear for me. I definitely don't wear heels and uncomfortable pieces for me. Yes, there is an element of like shock value in fashion. That's not necessarily why I wear the pieces I wear. Super big, uncomfortable outfits are super fun to wear. I mean, last night, you can go back and have a look at what I wore. I have literal bruises on my feet from the heels and from corsets, but I do that for every queer person across the world who will never get to say those words, who will never get to wear a dress, who might be in a space where their parent will never let them have that conversation. Or unfortunately, they might live in a country where where it's still legal to kill a gay person. I mean, we talk about it nearly every day in my community, but it's a very small part of the world where you can actually say the words, I am gay, or I'm queer, or I'm transgender, I'm non-binary, I'm binary, I'm a lesbian, and it be acceptable, both socially and by the law. We've got a long way to go in Australia in that conversation, and there is definitely a generation, and I don't mean an age, but a generational thought of people who maybe their opinion's not valid anymore, but I'm a human. I think that's the takeaway for me is I don't do that conversation for me. I do that for them because I hear them. I see them. This is the part where I cry. I'll never forget this moment as long as I live. But there was a
You're okay.
I have a really big rule about answering questions during Fashion Week. I'm so in my head about what I'm wearing and how I need to act for my outfit that I just kind of block everything else away. And my team is really big. If you've ever seen me at a Fashion Week, you'll know there's like 6 assistants to help me walk and help me move and help me operate my everyday life, let alone the little things that we're contracted to do during that space. There was a 7-year-old who had written to me years earlier, and I'd just never seen it. And when she had met me, she was 11. And she tried to talk to me, and I get really weird with kids and how that is anyway, because I just, as I said to you earlier, I never know what their parents have told them about the whole queer aspect. But let alone their visual outtake of what they see as a man wearing a dress, or what I should say to them about the world they're going to grow up into. So she came to us, and I really blanked it. I didn't clock it at all. She came in from the side, and I was in a huge outfit. It was about 11 meters long, and I was just in my head about having to get to this space. It was in the middle of Melbourne, and it was cobblestone. As you know, there's so many spaces in Melbourne that are cobblestone, which is not conducive to wearing heels. But she came in and she talked to one of my assistants, Laura, and she said, "Hey, I really need to speak to Jamie. There's something I feel like I need to say." And I said the words, you can clock me for it if you want after this conversation, but I said the words little girl to paint a picture. But Laura had stopped me. And Laura's quite quiet. She'll tell me when something's wrong, as will most of my team, but they're never the person that will be like, "Hey, this person wants to speak to you. Can you do this?" And Laura stopped me, like grabbed my arm and stopped me. And she said, "Hey, you need to stop." And I was like, "Okay." So everybody stopped. And this little girl came up to me and she said, "Hey, my name's James, and you helped me be transgender." And I just will never forget that moment as long as I live. Because in my head, even as a queer person, I had to like step back, and there was a little girl standing in front of me. But the power to change somebody else's trajectory is
and give them the confidence.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not words to do that. Her mum had chosen not to be in her life because of how that looked, and her aunt reminded me of a story that I had posted onto my MySpace about 1 million years ago. And there was that kind of conversation of, oh, wow, you actually have that impact. A lot of brands especially talk about influence, but in that moment it wasn't influence. In that moment it was impact. You broke a boundary. You set a tone for our conversation.
And for a child so little to
know
make that decision, and to know that, this person's doing this, so it's okay, and I can do it.
Yeah. And look, there are so many different conversations about whether a child should be allowed to do this, whether a child is of sound mind to do this, and all of those things. I definitely am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I couldn't tell you whether that conversation at that age was right, but for them it was. And I guess the thing I learned that day was you can only be the best version for you. You can't be the best version for anyone else. And whether that's right or wrong for someone else kind of doesn't matter. You can never kind of negate how you feel. And if what you feel is right, then that's right.
Right. Thank you. That was really beautiful. Thanks. And also a really incredible experience for you. And thank you for sharing that with us, because obviously it was such a monumental moment for you.
Definitely, yeah, it's humbling.
And it also shows you that I'm in the right space.
I hope so.
And I'm doing the right thing.
I try to be. I mean, I can only do the right thing for me. I think that's, as I said,
it's the most important. Yeah. Because no one else is living your life.
No.
And no one else has lived the journey you've lived, maybe similar, but
yeah,
only you have to exist in yourself.
Yeah,
so
true.
I want to jump forward a little bit now into some more lighter and joyful things to talk about. You're doing so many things, you're covering so many different aspects of the industry, entertainment, fashion, art, all of the above. What point did you kind of go, okay, this particular thing is what I want to do, and then everything else kind of came with it? Because we're kind of speaking about it before, how you didn't set up to be an Instagrammer. You didn't set up to go, yeah, I'm going to make content and post photos and videos.
Being an Instagrammer wasn't a job.
No.
It's such an interesting world to me when I see kids these days, and it's it's specifically kids. That I know there are adults that do it too, but who say, I want to be an influencer. And I think back to my days in high school and I'm like, dude, you have no idea how hard it is. You don't possess, and it's not their fault. They just don't possess the hard knock skills that it takes to be told no.
And the time.
Oh my God, you put in countless hours for a photo. Countless.
And it's draining if you can't get that photo.
There's an outfit. There's a photographer. For me, there's a team. There's a whole bunch of different people doing a bunch of different things to make sure that that image or moving image, whether it's video or photo, that you see is perfect. And still on the reverb side, there's someone that says, well, you're a faggot. That doesn't matter. It's such a different, So for me, when creating that image, it's such an interesting thing to think about how kids these days grow up and they see the visual. They see the pretty,
see the good side.
The pretty picture. And I worry for them. Like, I really do. I worry if they have the skill to be told, hey, you're too skinny, you're too fat, you're too tall, you're too this, you're too that, whatever that is.
It's definitely a harsher world and realm.
I'm really lucky. My world pertains to dressing celebrities. So I kind of get to hide a little bit because my job it is important. But my job is a behind-the-scenes job, essentially. Once upon a time, you would never know who someone's stylist was. They were just the stylist. And even now, I feel like if you talk to a stylist about being a stylist, they'll tell you, we have an unthankful job. That whoever it is that we might dress on that specific occasion might say the word thank you, but they'll never understand we were talking about it earlier, they'll never understand the 45 hours of work that you just put in for a 10-minute appearance.
Or one photo shoot and all the
time
that goes into picking the pieces.
I just worked with a musician. Actually, it just clicked in my head. I just worked with them. Maybe. Yeah, fine. I just worked with a musician. I won't say her name.
The thought process.
I just worked with a musician who changed her mind literally on the day of a concert. And I remember a team of 8 of us going to buy like $650 worth of material to cut it up and to make it into a custom couture piece. We'd sewn it together and she was like, no, that's not the one. We spent 9 hours just making.
What do you do in that situation?
Cry. You cry and then you find a new, like, we missed out on lunch. We didn't, we were all just sitting there being like hand sewing into like the ground. Again, that it just wasn't right for her. So what can I do? Try and make the next option work.
Do you have backups?
Yeah,
constantly?
on this specific space, yes, we did. And generally in life, I mean, every stylist, it's funny because in my head, all that's happening is Lana Wilkinson saying lastminute.com, and it's so true. Literally, the truer words have never been spoken because a stylist will never know until like the 11th hour and the 19th minute of an 11-hour and 20-minute innings. Like, I hate when I have to have that conversation with a brand, and they have a job to do. Their job is to say to me, okay, well, if this person wears it, I need a photo or I need them to mention it. With some of the people that I work with these days, that's just not an option, because you might be sending me something and I'm a really honest person. Like, I'll just tell you, like, it's not going to happen. Like, if you're talking about, I assisted 50 Cent's team when he was here. And I remember going in with Ange, his full-time stylist, going in with Ange to a store, I won't say the name, a store, and buying a piece. And the guy in store knew who I was and knew what I was working on, because it was like day 6 of working on this tour. And he was like, oh, we could get it for free for you. And I was like, no, dude, I just want to buy it. Like, just let me buy the piece. And he was like, no, I'll call head office and let them know that you're in store. And I was like,
I gotta go.
I'm gonna rip this up. I'm gonna cut it into different shapes. I don't want the conversation to be, hey, could you get a photo in this? It's just not gonna happen.
No.
What am I gonna do? Excuse me, Curtis, do you think you could just stop for 30 seconds? This is just not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. And so we bought it. And after the night, I had gone back to the hotel. The concert had gone on, and we'd cut it up. I think we cut the shoulder pads out, and we had sewed it into another jacket or another top somehow.
Crazy.
They had seen it, and they'd posted it. And I was like, fuck. I'm going to get in so much trouble now. I can feel the conversation coming back to me. And Ange was like, it's fine. It is what it is. They used the image. They probably shouldn't have. But I was there when you said, no, this is this. So if it does come back to you, I got you back. Anyway, about a week later, somebody on the team had seen it and sent it to me. And I was like, look, I'm really sorry that they used the image. I didn't mean for that to be the repercussion. And thankfully, he was really cool about it. But I've worked on with not just musicians, with other content creators, specifically content creators who are contracted and they have, they have to wear this or they have to be seen doing this. There was one content creator that comes to mind who held the wrong phone and lost a contract. And
wow.
It's those things that I think about.
It's the little things.
Yeah, absolutely. Because these days creating content is, you're a brand. You're a shiny product.
You're a walking promotion.
Absolutely. And there's a way you have to act. There's words you have to say. There are things. I have contracts right now that I know specifically use me because I am controversial for them. For them, I'm their version of controversy. For them, I'm their version of queer. I'm their version of whatever it is they think that I'm their version of, and that's fine. I'm completely fine with that. In fact, I would say the word complicit in knowing that that's what they want out of me. What I want out of them as a brand is to be able to further my career in the idea that I would partner with a brand if I believed in their product. I'm too old to do that. And I think that's maybe the side of the world that a lot of people don't get to see. A lot of non-content creators don't get to see that I'm not famous for being famous. I'm famous because I get to work with cool celebrities. But that's my job. I'm also Jamie.
Yeah.
I'm a very different person on the other side,
And we were talking about that as well earlier with many conversations we had before this.
Yeah.
Stepping away from content creation, entertainment world, when you're with your friends that aren't in this industry and outsiders thinking all you talk about is what you're going to post and what's the next thing and the hashtag you want to use, because I've definitely had that experience with other content creators and influencers where it's all they want to know is what you're doing next and what hashtag you use and how did you get this job and what's this person's email. What's your experience with that world?
A lot of the jobs I work on for the last couple of years are jobs I can't talk about. So I've gotten really good at. There was a period of time where I wasn't great at it, but I've gotten really great at just faking an answer. Oh, what's this person's email? Actually, I'm not really sure.
I don't deal with that.
Yeah, you'd have to talk to someone on my team. The thing that I think, to go back and answer both of your questions at once, the thing that I learned about being me is that I only owe me the kindness. I only owe me the thought process. I only owe me this. What I owe you is for me to be a nice person. That's it. And that's where that for all humans, that's where that ends. Whether you're my friend or you're not. I don't owe you anything. I owe you me being honest. That doesn't always mean that you're going to get the honest answer. That just means that what that answer looks like for you in that moment is that. I've worked on I worked on a show that you anyway. I worked on a show
We can't talk about.
that you will have definitely seen, and there was a period of time where I knew who was going to walk in this show, the person that was going to walk in the show. And it had been speculated for a little while, and I was reading articles about who was going to walk in the show, and they were really controversial, and they'd just broken up with somebody, and would they come back and do an interview? And he came back and did the show, and I remember so vividly me having like this preconceived idea of like he was going to be so professional and he's going to walk in, and he walked in and literally did the show, looked at me, shook my hand, and walked out. That was it. There was no conversation. It was like very bland, and I thought to myself afterward, wow, that was really weird. Like, did he not want to? Did he not have fun? And then I thought to myself, for him, that's just a paycheck. Like this is his job. He doesn't owe me anything. Doesn't owe me to be kind. He just owes me his reality. And for him, his reality was I got booked to do a job. I walked into the room. I did the job. I walked out.
Clocked off.
Now, maybe he'll never get booked again. That might be a reality. But he didn't owe me anything. And I feel like that's something I've gotten really good at. I don't owe you to tell you what hashtags I'm using. I don't care for that. Like, my world is so much bigger than me in nice square photos.
Mm.
That's the Jamie that you see on my Instagram. That's the Jamie that you see on TikTok, or maybe you've read an article about me, and that's that person. I'm such a different Jamie outside of that conversation. I think when you meet me, I think the thing that you walk away saying is, wow, that's not who I thought I was going to meet.
I know, just from my personal experience, like before coming in here, I was like, okay, like mentally preparing myself. To me, you're organized and put together and so business minded, which I think you are, but genuinely, like, you came in here and you're like, hey, how's it going? Like, I've got all these things. I'm going to put them down here and let's go. And it's going to be chill. And I really appreciate that, because the people like that, it makes it my job easy, because the people that take themselves really seriously, which is also a good quality to have,
Sure.
It makes my job really hard. And it's hard to have an easy conversation with someone that's puts a wall up. And to some people, it's necessary, but I'm not here to make anyone look bad. I
often find there's a lot of red tape in our industry about things you can talk to people about, especially with the level of celebrity that I get to work with. Things you can say, things you can't say. I find with red tape, it's just a human not wanting to answer a question. So if you can normalize that, great. I've had interviews that have asked me, so how do you feel about being called a faggot? How do you feel about people in the church not wanting you to get married? That, like, what do you want?
Yeah, what do you want me to say? Tell me the answer. What do you want the
answer to be here? Like, obviously I don't like that. So if you're going to ask me that question, you're going to get really defensive, Jamie. It's not that I'm not going to answer the question. I really think, for me personally, there's nothing that you can ask that I wouldn't answer. There's lots of conversations that I would be really uncomfortable about. But I agree with you. If you're going to put up a wall, someone's just going to dig at that wall. Like, why do that? But you're hurting yourself at the end of the day, because you are the only person that gets to give your opinion. You're the only person that gets to give your recantation.
And I know so many people that have put up the wall. It just gives me a bad perspective of that.
Exactly. And I think sometimes the more painful the conversation, the easier it is to have. I've just learnt to rip off a Band-Aid and go, yep, okay, I fucked up here. This is what it is. What do you want to ask me next? Because then people don't dig. They don't care anymore. You're like, oh, well, you owned your shit. Cool.
Move on.
Yeah.
The faster you own it, the faster the story's over.
Yeah. There is a story. I'm assuming if you've done your research, you know there is a story from Fashion Week that, like, I just didn't talk about because I was contracted to do a job, and they asked me, no, sorry, I shouldn't I shouldn't pitch it like they asked me not to say anything, but they asked me what had happened, and you saw one side of a story, and I just let it die because the model in the story wanted to be famous, and I didn't want to give her the credit. Like, I don't care that she filmed me doing something, or what she really filmed was me mimicking her. At the end of the day, she didn't get anything out of that article. She looked like an idiot. I'll be really honest and say, like, I'm sorry that that's the reality, but that's the reality. She looked like an idiot for having filmed it in the end. And now she's probably not going to work as a model, which is something I didn't think she thought about beforehand. I'm a stylist. Do you not think that in the style world we all talk? Like, we all have similar jobs. Yeah, okay, we're each other's competition, but the reality is we all know each other. We all are in the same world. We see each other quite often. If you come for one of us, you come for all of us. Like, it's just not that we're on a team and we're not going to book you, but the reality is if you're willing to say that about one person and you know you were in the wrong, what are you going to say about the next person or the next person or the next person? And I just think when you are that controversial person, no one wants to have that conversation. You know what I mean? Again, putting up the wall, but then not answering the questions. Just be honest about it and say, okay, well, you know what? I released this because I thought that they were being really rude to me in that moment. But on the flip side, I could have been being a dick. Fine. I don't like it, but I don't have to like it. It's your story, not mine. Yeah, so I think that's that full circle moment. Like, if you're going to ask a question, ask it. I have nothing to hide. But going back to the content creation side, that world is guarded for me. That world is, I have to say what I have to say about any given project, or there is a script to be emulated to some degree. Do I believe it? If I say it personally, I know I believe it. There are influencers out there that will take a paycheck and say whatever you want them to say.
Do you ever feel like content creation world side that you've said yes to a job and then you've gotten into the job and been like, I don't want to...
Many times, but
I don't agree with this.
You'll never see those. There are pieces we've filmed and I have pulled out of.
And what's the flip side of that? It just doesn't get aired? Do you...
Yeah, there was a... I can say it. There was a project that we filmed that we filmed.
Yeah.
It was a project we filmed. And at the end of it, I came out of a room and the director had said, "Oh, could you ask the gay one?" And I was like,
sorry.
I'm so sorry. What did you just say?
Say that again.
And he was like, "Oh, I meant like the," and I was like, is this real? Like, is Ashton Kutcher going to jump out and I'm going to be pranked here? Like, are we, what?
Are we filming?
And I literally, I said to, I think one of the ADs, "Hey, I just need 5. Like, I'm going to the toilet." And I called my agent and I was like, "I don't want to be here anymore." And they were like, this is a really big project. Are you sure? I mean, we'd already been paid, mind you, to do this project. We were in, I think we were filming in London, but I could be wrong. And I'd walked off, was on the phone, and I was like, I'm coming home. I don't want to do this job. Like, I just don't want to do this job. And they were like, "Well, your name's attached to this job. Like, it's already released." And I was like, "Well, I don't care. I don't feel comfortable here anymore." I got back to Australia. I'd explained to Charlie what had happened, and she was like, "Okay, well, like, if that's how you feel about it, I can't change this for you. Like, I'm sorry that was your takeaway, but there's going to be repercussions here." And the director came out and said I was really hard to work with and I got fired. And I never said anything about that.
Self-protection?
Yeah, absolutely. And cool, you do you. But like, the reality is nearly every room anyone ever walks into, especially these days, everyone's got a camera on them. Like that conversation was filmed. It's not, there's no two ways about that.
And if you had stayed in that situation and continued the job, it wouldn't have been good quality because you didn't feel comfortable.
There's not a job that will break your career. The job that will break your career is the one that you stay in that you don't want to. That's how I feel about that.
And you can feel energy and see energy through the screen every single time.
Like I said, there are 9 billion people on the earth. You're not going to be friends with all of them. So if at the end of the day that one takeaway is I'm not comfortable here, and is it worth the paycheck? That's why I don't really ever understand people who work, and I'm going to say it is going to be controversial. Sorry in advance. People who work office jobs, because for me, and I hope that you hear those words, for me, working in an office job is like my idea of the worst nightmare. Like waking up at 7 a.m., having breakfast by 8, being on the road till 9, going into a job that maybe you love, but maybe you don't, finishing at 5:30 and coming home, and like that's exhausting to me. I don't subscribe to that way of thinking. Like it's just not I can't do that.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so like is it worth the money? Is it worth your mental health? Is it worth the stress,
your morals and your values, compromising all of that?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm really interested to hear this from you, because you also talk a lot about mental health and well-being within everyone. Being in this industry, how do you maintain your well-being and your mental health posting online? And this is such like a opinion forward industry. How do you take a step back?
I'm pretty honest with my mental health specifically. I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was like 12 or 13. And I had a really horrible experience in my year 11. Once I'd left home and I'd moved to Sydney, I got really depressed, really, really depressed. I tried to commit suicide a couple of times, and I feel like a lot of creatives may lean into that space because of the way that our world works. Not the suicide side, sorry, the anxiety, creatives and having anxiety and depression. How do I deal with it these days is really simple. I'm really honest. If I'm having a bad day, I'm having a bad day. That's just what it is. We don't all have good days every day.
No way.
That's not how humans are built. It's just not, these days things are stressful. Things are, especially right now, the economy is what it is. Like there's no two ways about that. It's hard to live in 2024, and you might be a millionaire, or you may be average Joe working on the street. You might be homeless. We're all feeling the economic stranglehold on how that factors into the world. And maybe you budget and maybe you don't. For me, it's just about saying, okay, well, right now, this is my situation and this is how I feel. And I need 5 minutes, or today's not going to happen. Like, it's just not going to happen. I'm really sorry about it, but that is what it is.
That or I'm not going to be at my best.
Yeah. But me not being at my best is me breaking. Because like I said, I'm really bad at putting myself first and having that conversation. As an empath, I think it's the thing that everyone struggles with when they are really in this world. I don't do anything else. I'm a stylist influencer. I'm not a stylist and an influencer. I'm a stylist influencer. There's nothing else in my world. I don't get a break. I work for myself. My phone number is the one that people are calling, from clients to potential clients to having all of those conversations. So if I'm not honest with myself, I'm not honest with anyone else. If I'm giving you 80% of Jamie, that's you going, well, I'm not going to book Jamie again.
Do you have boundaries set up for yourself? Or are you answering that phone call?
There's a person that I will kind of check off with. He's one of my closest friends. And I kind of check in with him about, like, okay, this is how I feel about this. This is what I think about this. Is this possible? Is this doable? his reverb is always the same. If you feel like this is the wrong idea, then don't do it. If you think this is the wrong thing to say, don't say it. If you feel like you can't do today, then don't. If you need a day to sit in your bed and cry, then sit in your bed and cry. You know, weird that I'm about to bring him up for the second time in a conversation. 50 Cent said something really controversial one time, and like it took me forever to really see his point of view, but I really understand it. And maybe it's just because I've been through anxiety and depression that I really understand it. But anxiety and depression is a rich person problem. In the 90s, when we were working, it's not that you couldn't say the words, I have anxiety and depression. It's that you didn't. Because if you did say it, somebody would think you were crazy and they'd put you in a hospital bed. And that was the reverb. You would not have the chance to make money. These days, the reality is the same. You might actually be hospitalized for having to deal with those things, medicated, however that looks. But if you don't say it, the worst part of that comes out. You have to live with it. You have to be in here and go, God damn, I can't have this conversation. I can't do this physical act. And as soon as an employer sees that, then it's their duty of care to say something. Now, maybe they will say something, maybe they won't, but it's their duty of care. Like, we just had a really big situation with the mental health in a team that I work on, and the worst possible outcome came from that. And it's such a devastation when you don't even know. I knew this person. I had no idea that that was how she felt about things. So instead of getting there, let's have that conversation. For me, just for me. And maybe that makes me strong. Maybe that makes me edgy, but that's the reality. You have,
and you've existed in it.
Yeah, because if you don't, you allow it to win. And in my life, there's only one thing that wins. That's me.
Very good outlook.
Yeah, I try.
There's a lot of controversy around social media and being on it and the impacts that it has on people.
I don't think you want my opinion on this.
I think I do. I think I do. Please tell me.
I have a controversial one, but it is really how I feel about it. If you're not strong enough to deal with someone's opinions, don't deal with them. You put yourself out in a public space to be judged, essentially, no? Because you would take the praise, right? You would take the good notes. My phone's in there, but I can get it for you if you want, and we can go through my last 50 messages. I guarantee you more than half of them will say something like, you should die. Like, that's the reality. That's their opinion. Do you have to take it on board? No. Social media has a space, and there are going to be negative impacts of that space. There are positive and negative everything. If you go back in history, when we talk about, again, probably me being a little bit of a nerd here, but if you go back to the equilibrium of life, there is yin and yang, right? There is a good and bad, a pro and a con, a yin and a yang of everything. So if you can't take the yang, don't expect the yin. Like, there's no good and bad without it being good and bad. You made a choice. You put yourself out there, and people are going to judge that. That maybe you're lucky enough that they're going to say it to your face. Because I can promise you what they're saying behind your back is worse than what they're saying to your face.
100%. If
you can't take that social impact, you shouldn't be on social media. And there are many people on social media who shouldn't be on social media. If I am your target of hate, I'm sorry for you, because I'm going to keep on existing. And that might not be the right mental way to deal with that, but that's how I've learned to deal with that.
One way that I like to look at it as well, when like going through high school and doing what I do through high school, and now I'd rather it be me than someone who can't handle it, because I know I can.
I told you the story earlier about, I don't wear those really uncomfortable outfits for me. I do that for the LGBTQIA community out there who will never get the chance to. Honestly, if you feel like what you should do today is tell me how much you hate me, then I'm sorry for you, because it's falling on very deaf ears.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like it just is like, if you don't like me, cool. I'm not trying to be a friend. It just is like, if you don't like what I wore, you don't like. That's your opinion.
And I did. Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm gonna keep working.
Yeah, I still
keep
wore
getting
it.
better.
I still did it. I still said it. Like, it just, if you don't like that, that's on you. Which I think is maybe, Doja Cat, when she dropped her latest album, she said a really integral line. I can't remember exactly what it is now, but it says something like, that's how the internet failed. It's hard to champion someone you don't like. That's the truth. If you cannot like someone and tell them they did an amazing job. God, if I had to tell you how many businesses lied daily, you can say, you look nice today, and let that be what it is.
And then go on, and it's not going to affect you.
What does that 8 seconds of conversation affect you in life?
You probably won't remember it by tomorrow.
No. My hate specifically comes from women, not men.
Really?
Yeah. By far.
That's crazy.
I would say...
And I would never guess that.
I would say 90% is women.
Wow.
And it's things like, you're not one of us. You don't talk for us. This is disgusting. Generally speaking, from my very limited delving into it, it's generally religious women. They're generally from a certain type of space, not one that you would think about, to be very honest. I'll be honest with you. I have a lot of hate from Indonesia. They are a Muslim country. But I tend to get a lot of hate from there. I tend to get a lot of hate from the Middle East, just given how they view the world. I get a lot of hate from France. I get a lot of hate from Italy. They're super religious countries. I lived in Germany for a little while, so like there's...
Didn't you study in Paris
I did,
for a little bit? We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, but those countries are ultra religious. I mean, in Germany, things close on a Sunday. That's a foreign world to an Australian. Like, we just don't deal with that. Like the church never had that big of a stronghold on us. And maybe by the time the Brits got here and Australia happened, we'll leave that whole conversation of how that happened. But by the time that happened, I feel like the world had changed and we weren't as religious as, let's say, France or Germany, where they were so close to Italy and the birth of Christianity. Yeah, I just don't get it sometimes. Like I was in Paris Fashion Week. I was in Paris at Paris Fashion Week, and I got hit. And I was in menswear. And it's just by chance that I knew what the person was saying. Like, my French isn't great. I can speak it, but it's not great. Yeah, like there's a real life repercussion for a digital impact. Like, okay, now what? And I will happily say it to you. The police officer who was there, who saw what happened, still wouldn't do anything.
Crazy.
It was, yeah. He refused to believe it was prejudice or racially motivated, because this person had said, in Australia, you think you can be a faggot, but it's not okay. And he legitimately in French said those words. And yeah, there's a recording of it. The French police, the gendarmes, they all wear, I don't know what they're called, packs that record their day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a visual recording of it. And he still said, that's not what he said. Literally to my face.
Thinking that you couldn't understand?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you just had to be like...
Yeah, and I think that, when you look at it, it's such a hard one, right? Because, like, you want the world to be a safe place. You want the world to be a kind place, but That's not the world we live in. The world we live in has rapists and murderers and all the nasty things as well as all the good things. So it's a check and balance system. And while I think there is a system for visual life, everyday life, there maybe needs to be a system for online life. But until we grow through those growing pains and go through all of those experiences that are horrible and someone has to live through them. This is a great analogy. In Spain, we are very aware after Madeleine McCann that people used to live their children in their room by themselves. After Madeleine McCann, we didn't think that was okay anymore. So that's not what happens. Horrible experience. And I'm sure, however, we'll probably never know the truth of that story, but however that factored into the people in that world, her mum, her dad, the priest, the police, however that factored in that world, I'm sure they have an ingrained thought that this should be governed more consciously, right? The same that any victim of a murder's family feels about murders, or the victim of a car crash incident feels about car crashes. Yeah, we have to go through that in the digital world for us to then have the laws in the digital world. And it's unfortunate that we have to have growing pains, but it's the world. We can't govern for things that haven't happened yet.
And I'm loving these conversations we're having. It's really, really nice to hear your perspective on everything. And I feel like you've got a lot of wisdom as well.
I try. I grew up with my grandparents, so I feel like there's an age-old wisdom that has been imparted.
You've been taking it all in as you're growing up.
Yeah.
I want to go to the present now, the really, really exciting things. I was listening to Alex Earle, a short TikTok clip. She was talking about how stylists work, and what better person to ask than you. How does a stylist work when you're dressing someone? They don't get to keep the clothes?
It really depends on the situation. I mean, some of my most recent clients, sure.
They just...
Yeah. I mean, it's such a different conversation. I think when you're talking about stylists, you have to really differentiate how, like, you would be amazed at the people that have stylists these days. Once upon a time, back when I started, stylists were for celebrities. That was it. Sports people didn't have stylists. There wasn't stylists for TikToker down the road. Like, all of those things were not stylists. They weren't even jobs. Like, I mean, being a TikToker, being an Instagrammer wasn't a job when I started being a stylist. But it's interesting. These days, a brand will say to me, okay, this person can keep this and this, or this and this, but not this. Maybe this is the sample of this, or maybe this was a couture piece made for only them. But I guess it really depends on the opportunity, on what that brand gets out of them wearing it, all of the social media considerations, whether they're going to post it or not. I get asked that question more than anything. But for me, it's right now we're dressing, I think, 112 people, give or take. I don't know the actual number. You'd have to talk to my team about it. But right now we're dressing 112. Yeah, 112 people. I would say 90 of them would probably get to keep the clothes.
Wow. And probably wouldn't rewear them again.
It really depends.
If it's casual.
Yeah, look. Yeah. I mean, I'm really guilty of not wearing clothes twice. It's actually why it's why I wore that piece last night. The piece I wore to the Transformers launch. It's the first time I've worn an outfit like that twice, and I did it to remind people that we're humans. We don't always have to wear something new. We can just wear something new in a different way.
Do you keep all of your archives?
I don't. I'm really bad at keeping my closet. If you've seen my room, I live in a studio apartment, so it's quite a small space. It's not a small space, but it's compact. I also don't live anywhere very often. I travel for work, so keeping everything is just conducive to my mind being clogged, and I would never want to do that. If you've ever seen what I wear, my pieces are huge.
Yes.
Last night's piece was like a 6-meter cape. So where do you keep that? You know, you give it back to a
Kim
designer.
K storage shed.
Yeah, exactly. You give it back to a designer and you say, thanks. Like, I really appreciate wearing this. Let's make this into a different version of what this is.
What has been the longest piece you've worn? In memory.
It has. I tried to think about it after I said it out loud. It would have to be the Aria's outfit. Sean Rentero, I think 14 meters.
Wow.
It took 9 assistants to carry me in it. It was 98 kilos. I don't know what else I know about
Like
it.
a workout.
It was. Yeah, they had to. There was a point on the Aria's red carpet, and I'm so sorry to them, but they had to clear people out of my way because people were just like not. They couldn't get around me, and I don't know if you've seen that photo of me flicking the capette up. It took everything in my body to like flick this 90 kilo outfit just up and over because I am not 90 kilos. So like standing upright in it was
A full workout.
Yep.
A
Yes, it
complete
was.
workout.
Yep.
Who has been the biggest, you don't have to name names, biggest diva you've had to work with? Or diva experience?
I know exactly who it is. I can't say her name.
What was the situation?
She, if I say her name, I'll just get crucified. She's a really big model. Weirdly, it was a model because for me, models traditionally don't generally have a lot of opinions on what they wear. Their job is to be a hanging mannequin.
They look good in everything.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
She was here for an award show. She was 5.5 hours late to. No, she's not the worst. She's not the worst. I know. Oh wow.
5.5 hours is a while though.
Yeah. No. I don't think I could say her name either, but she also is a model. No, you know what? I'm gonna say her name. Hailey Bieber was.
Really?
We all have bad days. Everyone has bad days. I'm sure we all like. It's just an improbability that you as a human haven't had a bad day. Hailey Bieber was just really, 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 really rude to me.
Really?
And I felt.
Was it for a photo shoot for a brand
she
or
was here.
personal?
This was way before she was Hailey Bieber. She was.
Baldwin.
Thank you. I've totally blanked on what her name was then. She was Hailey Baldwin. She was trying to spruik. She was here to spruik something, and I can't remember what it was. It might have been a fragrance or something. A beauty line comes to mind. Yeah, I just got the opinion that she didn't want to be there. She didn't really want to look at the clothing. And in the end, she went with something she had previously. Even though she was getting paid to do a job, and so was I guess. Yeah, she was just very difficult. Very difficult to be on set. The other one I was thinking about was more not understanding that like everyone is there to do a job, and you, like, I guess they both kind of are.
Awareness?
Yeah, she was 5 hours late to a fitting that she was getting paid to wear. She was getting paid to wear something to an award show. She was 5.5 hours late. She then didn't want to wear any of the clothing that they had picked for her.
And that sets you back and everyone else.
Well, we didn't have another option. She's getting paid to do this job and she'd agreed to do it. There was a physical contract in place. And in the end, she was like 8 hours late for the event. She almost missed the event because it was an award show. So she arrived halfway through. They had to get somebody to come out and do her photos.
Wow.
So she could be on the red carpet because they were pulling the red carpet down by that point.
And for the photo and leave.
Yeah, it was just really.
A lot of people do that nowadays.
Yep, I will leave that there.
Okay, wrapping this up.
Yep.
my favorite question. I'm 17.
Cool.
What advice would you give me and yourself at 17 in this industry?
They'd be different. The advice that, and I always talk about this, the advice that I would give myself or my younger self at any age would be that one day tears are going to be your strength. I was the kind of kid who always took it in and never let it out, and that's why for me I had a mental break. There was a time in my early time in Sydney where I just broke. My advice for you and or children these days is try to fight through the fodder that you see, whether that's online or not, and use that time to figure out who you are, because that's what serviced me in my life. So I feel like that is a great way to progress your own conversation, whether that be socially or not. If you can spend, we spend countless hours doing homework a day as a child. If you can use a tenth of that time to figure out who you are as a person, you're leaps and bounds ahead of human beings. And I think that will really help you progress your conversation further as an adult.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Anytime.
And bringing your time and your presence here. I'm really grateful because, like we've said many times, you're extremely busy, especially this time of year. So I really appreciate you joining me on your day off.
Anytime.
So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.